I beg to move that the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, be now read a second time. This is an important bill, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to appreciate what this Senate has done the last few weeks, especially with regards to our brothers and sisters that serve in our constituent assemblies in the counties. You remember, Madam Speaker, that we have already passed legislation in this House that grants financial autonomy to our county assemblies, and that bill is presently on its way to the National Assembly for consideration. One of the biggest requests and asks that actually the county assemblies have made to this House as an elder brother in the devolution family, to ensure that we grant them the freedom with which they do, Madam Speaker, their responsibilities. Second, and most importantly, Madam Speaker, is looking generally into the welfare of members of county assembly. Madam Speaker, you know at the beginning of this term, the kind of conversation that we had about salaries of members of county assembly, where SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, drastically reduced remuneration for members of our county assembly and put it at a figure that perhaps shocked the country, especially those that know what service in public offices, especially elected officials, have to go through. And it left many of our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, in very difficult financial situations. And you know, Madam Speaker, I don't know whether that has contributed to the many wrangles that you continue to see in our county assemblies with the executive. In fact, in my 3 terms of being a senator, Madam Speaker, I have never seen a time where there is extreme wrangles between county assemblies and the executive as this particular time, Madam Speaker. And there are many reasons. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But I highly suspect that the fact that the welfare of members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, hasn't been sufficiently addressed since the onset of devolution, Madam Speaker, has a thing or two to do with it. You know, members of a county assembly look at those that serve in the first term, Madam Speaker. If you find that your predecessor MCA who served before you, when salaries were better and there were more consistent flow of money to our county governments, Madam Speaker, ever since they left office, are living in raw abject poverty, Madam Speaker, chances are, during your time of service, you will also be planning, because every politician lives with the practical reality of knowing that one day there will be a former something. It may be at the next election, the next or the subsequent one, they may survive it, but one day, one time, they will cease holding the power and the influence of public office, Madam Speaker, and therefore they need to be assured of their future, especially knowing the very fact that in this country, once you have served as an elected official, it's extremely difficult for you to secure employment elsewhere. Very few people will trust you. If you appear before an interview panel and you say, oh, I was a member of parliament previously, chances are very high that they will actually reject your request for employment, Madam Speaker. Then this passes and holds true from MCA all the way to members of parliament. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is not a waste of valuable legislative time to be processing this bill with regards to pension, actually, of our members of county assemblies, Madam Speaker. The principal object of this bill actually is to establish the county assemblies pension scheme, which is for all members of our county assemblies, and to provide for establishment of the scheme's board of trustees and provide for the scheme's management and administration. The bill proposes to have the scheme offer lump sum payments as provident, periodic payments as pension and income drawdowns. The proposed scheme will transition all members of a county assembly into one universal scheme for all 47 county governments, besides being open to other public officers and any other person that may be approved by this particular board. Madam Speaker, eventually when the devolution committee return their verdict on this particular bill, because earlier on I asked Senator Abbas, who's the chairperson of this committee, and I've had opportunity to listen to County Assemblies Forum, Madam Speaker, who shared their views and input on this particular bill. It will actually be important to note what their contributions will have been, how they intend the bill to be improved. But this is a basis upon which we are beginning this conversation on the need to ensure that members of our county assemblies, just like we that serve in the national legislature, have some form of pension, Madam Speaker. And let it be known, because I know how the Kenyan media operates, I would not be shocked if tomorrow morning I wake up to a screaming headline that says, oh, Majority Leader moves a bill to give pension to members of a county assembly. Then people will begin the usual conversation that is most of the time misinformed in our public spaces, Madam Speaker. This is not about raiding the public coffers. It is about setting up a pension scheme that perhaps, and just like ours, Madam Speaker, will be contributory. We are deducted monies actually during our time of service here in this house, Madam Speaker, and eventually when you retire and you get to the proper age, Madam Speaker, you earn pension depending on how much you've contributed over the years. And that's why the members that have served longer, Madam Speaker, enjoy more resources, because it is actually a contributory scheme and not a raid on the public coffers, Madam Speaker, as many would imagine. The establishment of this scheme is paramount, as it will provide financial security, Madam Speaker, for members of the county assembly upon retiring, and ensuring that they transition out of service with dignity and stability. I've explained, Madam Speaker, how we undermine devolution by having people serve in offices where they know that my only usefulness to this society is when I'm in office. And therefore, sometimes, even in their decision-making, the fact that you have no guaranteed security in the future, people tend to make decisions that are short-sighted because they have no absolute plan, but plan for the future. But if you are certain, Madam Speaker, that there is already a scheme set out for you, Madam Speaker, where in future, once you retire or once you exit, Madam Speaker, from that particular office, Madam Speaker, there is a decent salary that can keep you going. How many times do you meet former members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, who struggle even with basic things as basic as school fees and even food to eat? Madam Speaker, my phone is full of messages from people that I know from across the country who previously served as either councillors or members of a county assembly. They gave service to this country, Madam Speaker, but we haven't organized ourselves in a way that you equally enjoy pension once your days here are done or in public service. Without a pension scheme, members and staff of our county assemblies face challenges in meeting their needs, leading to financial vulnerability. Therefore, this bill actually establishes the county assembly pension scheme, which will cushion members of our county assemblies from financial strain post-retirement. For this reason, the importance of this bill, Madam Speaker, can never be gainsaid. There are various parts of the bill, Part 1 to Part 5. Part 1 of the bill, which compromises Clause 1 to 5, contains the preliminary matters, which is a title, interpretation of terms, applicable clauses, Madam Speaker, and institution, organization, or state officer who shall join, and the scope of the bill, which is to the extent and range of those who may access services of this particular scheme. Part 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, it comprises Clause 6 to 21, which provides for establishment of the scheme. It establishes the County Retirement Scheme Fund and its Board of Trustees, which provides the procedure for appointment of the trustees and the necessary qualifications. We don't want anybody, Madam Speaker, just any person that has the opportunity to arise and claim, Madam Speaker, that they should be allowed the chance to run these schemes. We need people that are qualified. So it provides that the trustees function and the powers and set the tenures to 3 years, renewable once, based on their performance, Madam Speaker. Part 3 of the bill, it comprises Clause 22 to 37, contains the provisions on the administration of the scheme and provide for the appointment of the fund managers and the custodian. It also sets out their function. The functions of the administrator, who is the CEO, are also set out. Further, the part provides for membership of the scheme without a sponsor, thus vesting of benefits and withdrawal from the retirement savings account and retirement from the service, among others. It sets out the prohibited payments from the scheme. the usual statutory requirements of any pension scheme for those that follow how pension schemes operate. Madam Speaker, this is nothing new. Part 4 of the bill, which is clause 38 to 44, Madam Speaker, it provides for establishment of and management of the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Fund, which contains financial provision. It provides for how surplus funds may be invested, as well as set out the requirements for the board to have a reserve account, Madam Speaker. A basic provision to ensure that for whatever reason, when members call upon the opportunity to draw from these funds, Madam Speaker, they have something that secures their future. You know, it's important, Madam Speaker, to ensure that our members of County Assembly actually, just like the rest of all of us that work in one place or the other, have financial stability upon their retirement. You know, Madam Speaker, it is not, oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I have noted the change. I was pretty much surprised addressing Madam Speaker only to notice she was behind me walking by. Mr. Speaker, it is assumed what is a contribution to poverty, Madam Speaker, where when they say poverty is a vicious cycle, Mr. Speaker, how many times actually people contribute to their own poverty by ensuring that they don't join any sort of a pension scheme, and eventually upon their retirement, they have to rely on members of the public or members of their family to sustain their life. And this should be actually the way. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can get to a point where all public servants, and not just us members of parliament, actually make contributions away from the national scheme of the NSSF. I know every employed adult in the Republic contribute to the National Social Security Fund, Mr. Speaker. But over and above, there are many other pension schemes that people contribute to and hope that in their retirement in future they can draw from. It's my hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can have all our public servants actually have a fund set out for them so that you don't have to go through what public servants go through, like police and teachers, by queuing at Bima House, Madam Speaker, for you to get your file approved. And most of the time, this is money that has been deducted from them. That I know we have combined that particular space with the setup of the, I think, public servant super, there's something, a very big, some institutions has a very big confusing name thereabout, but I don't know how practical it is. That's not what we are proposing for the MCAs. This is just one purely for members of our county assembly. Part 5 of the bill, which is clause 45 to 53, it sets out the general provisions, including the duty of care of the board, protection of trustees and employees of the scheme from personal liabilities, offenses, penalty clauses, the usual conversations about how to manage a scheme and how they conduct their business. So I wish to state that this is a very important bill, and I urge members of the Senate to support, Mr. Speaker, so that our brothers and sisters in our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, can have a more reliable pension scheme system, and upon their retirement from public office, Mr. Speaker, they live decent life like they lived during the days as they toiled and served members of the public. With those very many remarks, I beg to move and request the Senator for Tana River, Senator Danson Buya Mungatana, to second this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.